can we talk about democracy within the US itself? Your campaign has faced so many challenges. Could you talk us through some of these and what it tells us about the limits of US democracy? Also, could you speak to your strategy as a third party? How can the anti-war movement break through the two-party duopoly?
Yeah, so these questions are very intertwined. So there are many impediments to democracy. It's best summed up by the former Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, who said, "We have a choice between vast concentrations of wealth or democracy." Unfortunately, this country has chosen the former. When you have very concentrated wealth, it will find a way of distorting any democratic and electoral process. And that process has been underway for a long time. Arguably, we've never had real or full democracy. We were founded on an economy of slavery and did not count either women or non-landholders or African Americans as actual full voting citizens. So we've had to kind of crawl our way up here. But lately, we've been racing in the opposite direction, not crawling forward at all. And money has been extremely concentrated, especially in the last decade or so. And in the last couple of years, we saw billionaires double their wealth, while poverty rates among children have tripled in this country to absolutely outrageous levels. So we're an oligarchy. We are really not a democracy, and money talks. And we at one point had campaign finance rules that set some limits on the power of oligarchs to buy our elections. But those rules have basically been busted to smithereens right now. And through super PACs, through dark money, through so-called victory funds, there are all these legalized loopholes for corruption, or I should say loopholes for legalized corruption, But the fact that it's legal doesn't mean it's not corrupt. When money is basically buying out our democracy, and it's a pay-to-play political system where Wall Street and the war machine and big pharma and health insurance and the real estate industry, they really call the shots at the level of the White House, Congress, state capitals, and in our municipalities as well. It's really pervasive. In this election, let me say, one of the biggest hurdles we've had is ballot access, because when laws and regulations are bought and paid for, you can be sure that the economic elites create rules to keep people-powered campaigns off the ballot and out of the discussion. So we are effectively shadow banned on social media. We know that from the Twitter files that Elon Musk had granted access to the internal communications of Twitter. And yes, I am classified along with WikiLeaks, which I consider a great honor, as is Russian and severely suppressed on social media. And, it's not just me. Lots of us are suppressed, especially if we're objecting to the endless war machine. So we're suppressed on legacy media, and in social media, we are kept off the ballot by these outrageous rules that basically grandfather you in if you're already a big party. Otherwise, you have to collect, if you were starting from the beginning, you'd have to collect 1 million signatures before you'd actually be on the ballot as a competitive voice. We began the election already having ballot status on many of the large states because as Greens, we've learned how to watchdog our ballot status and maintain it basically through running candidates and achieving a certain number of votes. But there are 50 different rules, 51 including the District of Columbia, and it is a very daunting process to fight this battle in order to actually be on the ballot across the country. We were very determined from the start. We wanted to be on the ballot for just about every voter, because if you're challenging empire, you cannot do that in a credible way unless you are on the ballot. So we are on the ballot now for about 95% of voters having played that game, which entailed going to court many times. We're still in court on a couple cases, because if you're going to challenge these rules, and also not only the rules, but let me put it this way, the Democrats hired what they called an army of lawyers early in the campaign in order to throw us off the ballot, in order to throw their competition. This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is a serious threat to democracy, in the same way that Donald Trump not recognizing and not allowing the peaceful transfer of power or recognizing the outcome of the election, that is a threat to a democracy. It's also a serious, equally devastating threat to democracy to prevent the exercise of free and fair voting, by throwing competitors off the ballot. This is what authoritarian countries do, and the Democrats excel at that. the Republicans, they have their own techniques to strip voter rolls of competitors they don't want, but the Democrats do their part in that as well. And throwing candidates off the ballot, the Democrats kind of excel at this. So they have an army of lawyers. They threw us off the ballot in many states, and then we have to go to court to challenge them. We have prevailed in most of those cases, but not quite all of them. So that's a big hurdle. It ties up your money. It ties up your time. It's a very anti-democratic tactic. They also publicly advertised for people to manage spies and infiltrators to mess up our operations. And that's posted on our social media so people can read it. I long suspected that was going on, but we didn't have proof. This is absolute proof, and they've been caught red-handed before. In 2022, the Democrats impersonated the Greens, called up people who had signed our petitions, and said that they were the Green Party. Would you please take your name off of this ballot petition to get a Green anti-war candidate on the ballot running for Senate in 2022 in North Carolina? They happened to call the co-chair of the Green Party of the state, who recorded the conversation and presented it in court, and they were found guilty. In my view, they should have been found guilty of fraud and election interference, because how is that not worse than some irrelevant social media meme posted by the Russian Internet Research Agency, which posted a number of irrelevant and ludicrous memes, and that was called election interference. Well, if you're actually calling people up, misrepresenting yourself as that party and manipulating people into basically getting a candidate removed from the ballot, how's that not election interference? I don't know. But it was judged very gently and a few $1,000 fine. But proof of principle here that the Democrats, they need to be renamed the anti-democratic party. They also interfered with the distribution of our matching funds, public money, which would have enabled us to have gotten on the ballot in a couple more states where we were not able, because we didn't have the money at the time to do it, where we had to pay a big fee, for example, in Oklahoma. So they've used ridiculous, dishonest, manipulative, anti-democratic tactics to silence their opposition. That is not what democracy looks like. That's the kind of thing they rely on, and which outrages the American people. They should have allowed us into debates. Debates should be based on choices that the American people have. If you are on the ballot in enough states that you could, in theory, win the election, which is how the League of Women Voters used to run the debates, that's the way it should be run now. The Democrats don't do that. In fact, they don't even work through the commission on presidential debates right now. They just sort of schedule things ad hoc, and they collude in order to lock out other candidates, which should be a violation of campaign finance laws. But, the whole system is sort of biased in their favor right now. So it's kind of a culture of manipulation, a predatory form of politics. Why? Because they are terrified that people should discover that they have a choice and that they learn what those choices are. And that, in fact, we do have solutions to solve this devastating crisis of unaffordable housing. People are being evicted and going homeless in record numbers. The crisis of healthcare, the crisis of debt, the climate crisis, you name it, and the crisis of endless war and the devastating cost of that to everyday Americans and our small businesses. We can solve these problems, and we have the solutions to do it. And let me say the numbers are there to do it as well. 1 out of every 3 eligible voters chose not to vote in the presidential race of 2020 because they inherently reject these corporate-sponsored predatory candidates and the zombie parties that represent them. So if we were able to get the word out to the grassroots out there, and these non-voters, by the way, just happen to be younger, lower income, and of color in much higher proportions. So these are the people who would enormously benefit from our agenda, including abolishing student debt and medical debt, making public higher education free, rent control across the country, et cetera. The other things that we've discussed. To get the word out is to basically win the argument. The minute we get to the microphone, we win the argument. That's what they're terrified of. If they were actually terrified of a split vote, of us spoiling the election, that can be solved through ranked choice voting. And we've had that solution on the table for a long time. The Democrats fight it. And actually the Republicans do too, but the Democrats especially, because they are terrified that they can't use fear campaigning. They rely on fear campaigning to get people to vote based on who you hate the most rather than who you actually support. And that's no way to move a democracy forward. Democracy needs a vision, it needs an agenda, it needs an explicit goal. And we very much subscribe to the words of Frederick Douglass, who said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will. We have to be that demand. That demand is strong. We have the numbers that, in theory, we could even win this election. So bottom line, if anybody out there is a U.S. citizen, or you have a green card, you live in the U.S. or not, you can win this election on behalf of your future and your children and a world that works for all of us. You can join in no matter where you are. You can be part of this grassroots movement. And this is simply a matter of going to our website, jillstein2024.com, and sign up to volunteer. If you can contribute, make a contribution. Every dollar helps us hire more organizers to support this grassroots movement. But this is how grassroots campaigns can win. And because they're drawing on non-traditional voters, it won't show up in the polls. It will completely come out of left field. So we really encourage people to go to our website, again, jillstein2024.com, sign up, contribute, but especially sign up to volunteer. If you volunteer, you then have support to make phone calls, to be part of the calling effort, phone banking, and we provide you the script and the numbers, who to call. We can give you access to flyers. We can provide you with the flyers. Tabling to get the word out, whether it's a CSA, a farmer's market, a grocery store, festivals, and door knocking, and then social media and so on. So just by turning the crank of regular old grassroots outreach, typically called get out the vote, but it's also voter persuasion. It's mostly informing and empowering voters that they actually have agency in this election, and that every vote for our campaign is a vote against genocide. It is a vote against World War III that we're on the verge of. It is a vote for healthcare as a human right, for affordable housing as a human right, for ending student debt, and so on. We can actually achieve these things if we stand up with our numbers. And even if we don't win the White House, we win the day by having a strong base and showing that there is a very active, vibrant constituency that is fighting for this agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit. We have the numbers, and however strong we show up on election day and in the early voting, it's all to the good. This is a win-win. There is no lesser evil in this campaign. There is no lesser evil when one is conducting genocide and the other one is saying to hurry up and finish the job, when they are both attacking and the Democrats are leading the attack on our basic First Amendment rights. There is no lesser evil here. The abortion problem could be solved right now by the Democrats. They can set up abortion clinics right now on federal land in every state, in multiple sites on every state. So this is a concocted problem to enable them to use fear and extort your vote. Do not let your vote be extorted. Do not sell your soul here by voting for genocide. If you vote for genocide, you are affirming and enabling it. Children being massacred on an industrial scale, they are not backing off. They are now expanding this genocide into the West Bank and arguably into Lebanon as well. And they're about to attack Iran. And the U.S. is sending boots on the ground as well as special missiles. And Kamala Harris, along with Joe Biden, are in this. They are in this to the last American, effectively, not just to the last Israeli, to the last American. We can use international law and human rights here and ensure that everyone has security. This is not about sacrificing Jews. And in fact, the issue is not a religious one. It is an issue of Zionism, which is a political ideology that is not subscribed to, has always been controversial, actually, within Judaism. And I say this as a Jew myself, born right after the Holocaust. Zionism is the problem, and this is readily fixed. And Israel can simply comply with international law here and ensure that everyone has security, dignity, and justice, and the full rights of citizenship from the river to the sea and beyond. We can solve that problem right now in a way that is sustainable and just for everyone. Otherwise, we are going down essentially this road to death and destruction for us all, and we don't need to go there. We can fix this if we stand up and we insist that we have a government that's working for us, not for AIPAC and the war contractors. So again, every vote for our campaign is a vote for a sustainable, just future and a peaceful future for us all. This is within our reach. So please join the team and let's make it happen.